Hey YouTube, Joe here from Metafish. Hope you're having a great day. I just got in a big order of new flake food, and I wanted to do a quick video on how I prepare the food, make it as easy for myself as possible to feed all the different foods that I feed. Today we're going to be mixing up flake and putting it into containers. Just makes your life easy, keeps the food fresh as possible. I think I haven't found a better way to do it yet. So hopefully you'll find some value in this, and I have a couple other tips and tricks that aren't normally talked about in other YouTube videos. You're probably asking yourself, why are there so many of these Tetracolor containers? This is one of my favorite foods, and if I could find it cheaper at a better bulk price, I would feed this probably up to 50 to 75% of the fish in my fish room. It's not that high of a protein content. I mean, it's a good protein content, 47.5%. 6.5% crude fat, so pretty low on the fat. I've actually fed this to my Tropheus as treats once in a while, and I've had no ill effects. They're actually starting to bulk up and start producing a few eggs for me, so I've seen some positive results. Overall, the fish go crazy for it. I love it. You can't really beat Tetracolor granule. I'll do a separate video on how I feed this out. I use actually ketchup and mustard bottles. They're restaurant container bottles that you'd see in any restaurant. So I'll have to leave a link to that later on. I'll do a separate video on that because I also use a coffee grinder to grind this stuff up for my small fish, and it works out great. It doesn't take that much time, but that's not what this video is about. This video is about how I prepare bulk foods, because I have 144 water boxes. Those aren't all aquariums. 40 of those are breeder boxes in my basement, but each one of those has fish in it that have to be fed. So I do go the bulk food route. Now, some of the people that who have done these videos in the past, and you probably trust, and I'm not saying they're wrong, they'll tell you only buy as much food as you can feed. Ideally in 2 weeks, within a month is sort of okay. The longer you go, the more nutritional value that you leave that food out, especially if you're opening the container and oxygen's getting into the container. It loses nutritional value. You lose a lot of those vitamins and minerals. It's not as palpable to the fish. So they'll tell you just buy as much as you can feed, no more than a month to 2 months max. And that's not bad advice, but my take on it is I can get the bulk foods cheaper. I feel like I can store them just as good. That's why I'm using these containers. So I'm going to mix up a bunch of flake food. I like to give them a variety. I think variety is very important. It's served me well. Some of my foods have probiotics in them, which is beneficial bacteria for their gut, basically. It's supposedly supposed to help aid digestion and overall fish health. I have nothing to say on that. I don't know if it does or doesn't. It's kind of a controversial subject. Draw your own conclusions, but I do not think it hurts. But one thing, if you have probiotics in your food, you do not want to freeze those foods. That's not often talked about. So what I'll do is I'll open up these bags, I'll mix up all my food, I'll store them in these containers, which are fairly airtight, and I won't freeze these containers. I will keep them stored in the fridge. So every week when I use up one of these containers, I'll just grab a new fresh one out of the fridge. Now, I know these may not be 100% airtight, so don't quote me on that, but I think they're pretty good. They're very convenient. It's very easy to open up this top, pour out the amount of food you want. For me, I add water to my food, which that's another controversial topic, but it makes it easier for me, and I'm not handling the food and getting moisture in the container all the time. I'll pour out a cup that's enough for one feeding. I feed my fish twice a day. I try to do a varied diet. I'll feed flake probably at least 4 days a week, depending on how many live foods and pellets that I decide to feed, or Tetracolor granules I decide to feed for the week. I don't think it matters that much what types of food. Pay attention to the ingredients, but I think mixing just helps. So I'm going to show you how I prepare it, make it easy for myself, and I should have 2 to 3 months worth of food quickly available in the fridge. Every time I run out of a container, I'll have fresh available. And then in 2 to 3 months, I'll have to mix up another batch. So one thing that I do is, this is not necessary, but I actually do have a fish allergy. which I don't think I've ever said on the channel before, but if I'm filleting fish that I catch in the wild, or if I eat a piece of fish, I will end up in the hospital. It'll get into my bloodstream and my lungs will start wheezing. It's really bad. So isn't that weird that I love fish this much and it's the one thing that I guess is dangerous and can really kill me? I've been allergic to it my whole life. Ended up in the hospital twice. Anyways, I'm wearing the gloves. Another reason to wear latex gloves or any kind of gloves, you could use jersey gloves. I mean, those brown gloves that you see at the store for 99 cents, is you just don't want your oils. Your oils are not going to be beneficial to the fish, so any of the oils on your hand, it's another reason that I mix it up with water and then add it to the fish tanks, is because I'm not constantly getting my oils on that food. I don't think it's very harmful at all if you do it that way, but anything you can do to give you and your fish an advantage in this hobby, as long as it doesn't take a lot of effort, I think you should try to do those things. So this is just one of those things. For me, it makes more sense because I'm allergic to fish anyways, and a lot of these foods are processed fish. The only other tool you really need is a pair of scissors to cut open some of the new bags of food, and I'm just going to mix them in these big plastic bowls. So first off, I'm going to mix up red flake. And what's kind of nice about these Tetra containers, you can get these tropical color crisps. They're not my favorite, but the fish do love them, and they do have just as good of nutrients, and they're a little bit higher in the crude fat, a little bit lower in the protein. But you know, they got pictures of angelfish and rainbow fish. They're okay, but they have a different color lid, so that makes it very easy for me to have, like the green ones, I'll put the pellets in when I mix up my different pellets. The red ones, I'll do my red flake. I call it red flake because any fish that's not a Mabuna or a Tropheus in my fish room can handle and prefers mostly a higher protein flake and pellet. And then for the Tropheus food, I just mark all the way around it with a Sharpie marker, and then I can easily tell what the Tropheus containers are that are full of Tropheus food. And I just think these are great. But yeah, let's just start mixing up the food. There's really not too much to it. You just mix out, you know, depending on if you have a big bag of one thing and a small bag of another, you know, as long as you're feeding them a varied diet, I think mixing the food just makes it easier. You don't have to remember, did I feed them this flake one day? Now I should feed them this flake, and you don't have to really remember that because you're always feeding them the maximum varied diet. It's worked well for me, so. This looks the same, but it's actually a different mix of food. And these ones are coming in a lot bigger flake, so we're going to have to mix these up to get more consistency that the fish will enjoy. So that's another thing that makes it really easy. Is if you have big flakes like this, every time you get the food out, you're going to have to crumble it to the right size. If you do it all here at once, and break up some of these chunks and pieces, you won't have to do that. So there, and then I just go through some of these bigger flakes. I just try to mix and break this up until it's about the right size. So what I'm looking for when I feed these fish is about like this. You don't want it too small. You don't want it too big. So most of it will break up as you mix it. So you know what? I think I'm going to use a little bit more of this flake. Just because it doesn't feel like there's a whole lot of it in here. So I'll add that in. And there we go. There's kind of the final product right there. That's about exactly what I'd like to start feeding my fish. Some of the brown flake broke up a little too small, but I think it'll be just fine. So, super easy. Start taking your containers and filling them. You don't need to pack them, just I like to get them pretty full. And there we go, that'll go right in the fridge and it'll be ready for me to use whenever I run out of the one that I have out and that I'm using. And this is actually just fine. I'm going to continue to mix up my Tropheus flake, and that's not going to hurt them. You know, you just don't want to feed them all high protein, in my opinion. A little bit of protein, I think, is good for the Tropheus. You know what, I'll probably fold it over, put a piece of tape over it too, just to make sure. And then back into the fridge that'll go for now. So same as the other food, I'll just mix it up. And then I'm going to use this in Tropheus containers, and I'll be all set for Tropheus and Mabuna food. I say Tropheus, but, you know, kind of crush up some of these bigger green flakes a little. Try to get it all the same consistency. This is basically it. Not a whole lot more to talk about. Just make it easy on yourself. Get a nice consistent flake. Mix up your foods to get a varied diet, which makes it easier on yourself, and I think is better for the fish as well. And you should have success.